There are two great thinkers that always kind of wrench me apart when I'm thinking about these big issues of meaning and goodness. One is Nietzsche, who in The Gay Signs prophesied the death of God, but didn't think it was something to be taken trivially, as though, the local bus had been cancelled or something. I mean, this is momentous, because God has been so important in human history. God has been a source not only of love and forgiveness, but of discipline and a motive for morality. And if you lose that, where do you find the strength and the authority to struggle to be good? And Dostoevsky was another great creative thinker who was an atheist and a believer, who was a libertine and a saint, all in one. You get it in his novels. Great creative people are like that they're able to encompass the whole of human experience. And he famously said in his great novel, The Brothers Karamazov, God, if you do not exist, everything is permitted, meaning that there was no longer, as it were, any authority figure, any big father figure to restrain our terrible appetites. And there's undoubtedly something in that, because it means that we've become orphan children who don't have parents to teach us how to behave, and so we're having to make it up as we go along, which I suppose to some extent we always have been doing, but we'd invented or discovered or encountered a God who somehow gave us a motive for trying to be good and for caring for each other. But of course, you can turn Dostoevsky on his head, because if everything is permitted, then in a sense nothing is permitted, because there is no permitter. We're now on our own. Our parents have died, or we've grown up and left home, and we're having to learn how to live well by ourselves. And I think in many ways that's morally more appropriate and challenging, because one of the problems with a religiously motivated morality is that it can often be a morality of fear, because you're afraid of going to hell for certain behaviours. If you avoid the behaviour so that you don't go to hell, you're not being good, you're being frightened. And the real trick in a creative morality is to so be in touch with goodness for its own sake and virtue for its own sake that you do the right thing for the right reason and not for the wrong reason. And it's still tough, and there's no doubt at all that sanctions and discipline and threat of punishment can affect your behaviour, the way you act, but it doesn't change your heart. And the secret of truly moral, wise, good behaviour is to have your heart changed, so that you do the good thing to the person in need out of love, out of pity and compassion. And I think that that's really what's at the root of human morality. It's the way your heart is broken when you see the pain of another. That's what the parable of the Good Samaritan is about. And I think that if we're honest with each other, it's the capacity to feel sympathy for the other, to get into the other person's shoes, even the bad person, the person who's actually made a colossal muck-up of their lives and pulled a lot of publicity down upon themselves. They persuaded their wife to take their penalty points for a driving offence, a thing that others have done, and there they are, blazoned in the headlines of the world. And a good person's heart should go out to that person, because you know how hellish they'll be feeling. To be paraded like that, to be shamed in front of the whole world. And a good person should feel that and have a kind of compassion and pity for them. So at the root of a creative morality is this ability to put yourself into the lives of another person. The other thing that I would say about it, however, is that we need to be versatile and not hold our moral standards too tightly, because very often they're wrong. We've been wrong about a lot of things in human history. We were wrong about slavery. Good persons believed that it was possible to enslave other humans. They very often kidded themselves on that the people they enslaved weren't truly human, they were like animals. But even animals, are they to be treated cruelly? No, a creative morality is based on sympathy and empathy, a compassion for the other. But it's also based on a kind of skepticism that you might be wrong about things. We were wrong about slavery. Christianity was wrong about the status of women. We're wrong about gay people. We've only, in my lifetime, enabled ourselves to be compassionate and understanding towards sexual minorities. So what are we ignoring in our time that in 50, 100 years' time, people looking back will say, how could they justify living that way, doing those things? And one of the problems with dear old religion is that it so associates its moral convictions with God. It claims, by the way, this point of view is not just a human point of view that might be revisable. It comes from God. And how can you revise God? Which is why the church is always in a fix whenever it's trying to negotiate a new moral discovery. Because it says, well, I'd like to make women the equivalent of men in church, but God apparently doesn't agree. I'd like to liberate gays, but God apparently hates fags. It's there in the Holy Book and so on. And that's why you have to come back and say, well, maybe God's wrong about it, or you got God wrong. Hold these things with a kind of lightness, a kind of provisionality, because if you wrap the reins of morality too tightly round your hands, the kind of charioteer of your own wrongness might pull your arms out of their socket. So be prepared to abandon a point of view.